So a couple of weeks ago, I made a video on mass-produced Gundams, and even though most of the comments were positive and constructive, I'll cover those in the second part of this video, I also noticed a quite disturbing trend amongst them. One of the Gundams I talked about was the Gundam Mk.II, which a lot of people would assume only had 3 units made. Because, well, that is the narrative we most commonly get. But, like I said in that video, going by the Zeta Gundam movies and also the HD version of the 2.0 master grades, there's actually a 4th unit. A 4th unit that some helpful commenters have also pointed out is expanded upon in some other manga. So far, so good. But there were also some other comments that left me more worried. A not unsubstantial amount of people commented that the 4th Gundam Mk.II is actually a Quel. Could it be that those people mistakenly looked at the bottom left instead of the top right that the video was clearly zooming in on? No. Obviously, a lot of people have problems differentiating between the Quel and the Gundam Mk.II. And while you might laugh at them for that because, well, at first glance they're completely different machines, because they are, to the more casual Gundam fans, they're more similar than you might think. Both are cool, darkly colored machines. And think about it, if I already got this many people willingly admitting that they cannot tell the difference, just imagine how many people are suffering from this same issue in silence. So as a self-proclaimed Advance of Zeta aficionado, it is my duty to give you the best guide on how to distinguish Quels from Gundam Mk.IIs. Pay attention. One day, this might just save your life. And for this crash course, we're actually going to be following the advice of one of those poor folks whose soul is dragged down by gravity. Pay close attention to the backpack, the skirt, and the head. The Quel has a fairly standard backpack that is derived from the Custom. There's 2 big thrusters on there and only a single beam saber. The Mk.II, on the other hand, goes for a much more revolutionary design, with a whopping 4 main thrusters and 2 movable sub-thrusters that house a beam saber each. And on both images of Unit 4, we can clearly see the 2 sub-thrusters and the beam sabers that they house. Next up then is the skirt armor. The Quel uses the older and simpler design that has those very distinct boxes on them, as also seen on the original Gundam. The Gundam Mk.II then has a much sleeker design, and again, this is exactly what we see on Unit 4. And finally then, the head. Again, something that might be more similar than we think to the untrained eye. But with these tips, you will never mix them up again. As a Gundam, the Mk.II has those very distinct dual eyes, versus the Quel's visor, and it also comes with a very colorful V-fin to further set it apart from the Quel. As you can see, the Quel's head is mostly dark blue with a bit of black, a yellow visor, and a green sensor, but the Mk.II's head, while it is also almost entirely dark blue with some green from the sensors, it now also has yellow and red from the V-fin and the chin. So to keep it simple, only the Gundam Mk.II's head has red on it. And what do we see in this image? A distinct red blob, and the same goes for the model kit art of Unit 4. So I think we can conclusively say that Unit 4 is in fact not a Quel and is a Gundam Mk.II. If you've noticed that someone you love or you yourself are suffering from a similar issue, do not hesitate to call 1-800-NOTAZAKU.com. Help is only a single phone call away. On a more serious note then, someone wondered if the Unit 4 that we see in the Zeta Gundam movie compilation could be one of the Hazels instead. And while I do like that idea, when we look at the legs, the ankle armor, and the feet, you quickly debunk that theory. We've got the clearly very pronounced knees, the yellow thrusters on the sides of the legs, and the exposed inner frame due to the movable frame technology. Also, there are no Hazels with red on their V-fin, something that this machine does have, so unfortunately, that's a no. And now on to the comments regarding the other mass-produced Gundams. First and foremost, I joked about wanting a fourth unicorn to exist, and I totally forgot about the one that appeared in Reconquista in G, From the Past to the Future. The model number is somewhat different, but everything else seems to be virtually identical, so this totally would have qualified for the video. And talking about fourth units, with Code Fairy coming out, there is now apparently also a fourth Pixy Gundam on the stage. I say apparently because I haven't yet had the time to dive deeply into Code Fairy, so I couldn't definitively tell you if the Code Fairy Pixy is one of the three commonly cited Pixies, or if it's a fourth unit. But after quickly looking into it, it would seem that the one from Code Fairy could be a prototype of some kind, effectively making it a fourth unit. Another unit then that was mentioned quite a bit was the Zeta Plus. But unlike the fourth unicorn, this wasn't a unit I'd forgotten about, but rather one that didn't qualify for the list. One of the requirements I had was that the Gundam itself had to be produced. In this case, that would be the Zeta Gundam and not a version of it. And because the Zeta Plus itself isn't called a Gundam, I also didn't consider it as a mass-produced Gundam in and of itself. The Zeta Plus is kinda to the Zeta Gundam what the Gym is to the original Gundam. But, I hear you say, if I gave an honorable mention to the Murasame and the M1 Astray, didn't the Zeta Plus at least deserve an honorable mention too? Yes. The thing is, the segment about the Murasame and the M1 Astray was a very late addition to the script, and was kinda added in jest because I have seen quite some comments about people wondering if they're actually Gundams or not. And by this time, I simply didn't think about including the Zeta Plus as an honorable mention. And then for the two final honorable mentions, we've got the Raider Full Spec and the Gundam Ground Type S. The thing with these is that I'd argue that they're not necessarily Gundams, but if I had remembered them for the original video, I probably would have included them as honorable mentions. The Raider Full Spec is a very similar story to the Forbidden Blue and the Forbidden Vortex, where it's not called a Gundam, but I think most people would argue in favor of this being a Gundam. And it did appear in the Gundam Seed Destiny remasters for like 2 seconds. The Gundam Ground Type S then is kinda the opposite. It's called a Gundam, but it is essentially just an overhauled Gym with a Gundam head for psychological warfare. So while I'd say that it's not really a Gundam just like the early Hazels, it is technically a Gundam that is both mass-produced and animated.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
As for some of the other mass-produced Gundams that were mentioned then, let's just say that I didn't include mainly animated ones for no reason. Or like the academics like to say, that is beyond the scope of this video. But fear not, I'm fairly certain that I can make a follow-up video focusing mostly on the non-animated ones at a later date. But that has been all for this video. A big thank you to everyone who left comments. As always, another big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.